Hello, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to another edition of Achieving Unity Success Formula Podcast, where we turn chaos into connection and purpose into action. I am your host, Mark Intrican, and today is another episode about the Achieving Unity Success Formula, making life better by encouraging, inspiring, and including others. You see by our first screen, it's our gift to you, and we hope you will go get a copy of it. It is our Achieving Unity Guide to help us all in what achieving unity is all about. It's a process of being more in tune with each other. And it's not a soft skill, it is a true mindset. Each of us helping each other. We can't do it alone. We're always dependent on each other. With our Achieving Unity Guide, we can get beyond things such as frustration, disconnection, and avoiding others because of minor differences. So please get a copy of it. The QR code on the bottom left will get you the Unity Guide and get to our blog, our newsletter, with the QR code on the bottom right. Would always love to hear from you. This again is the Achieving Unity Success Formula, and welcome to weekly podcast number 45. We are here every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, waiting to hear from you and hear what you want to see, to hear what you want in the podcast, because this is all about us working together. We are the reality focused dynamics, success focused solution. One thing we want to know is what we can do to help each other in what we do, where we go, and where we grow, because it's all about focus. As you can see in our logo here, it truly represents the heart of what we do. Notice how focused is right in the center. That's because everything that we explore is from reality focused dynamics, bringing us success focused solutions, and they revolve around clear, intentional direction. In fact, that idea of focus is so central to us, it's even built right into our business phone number, 303-362-8733, which spells 303 focused on your phone pad. We believe that truly focusing on what matters can create meaningful change and achieving lasting unity. We have proven compassionate strategies that turn conflict, the conflict we run into every day, into lasting harmony at home, at work, and in every relationship that matters. Turn that conflict into connection. Have you ever been frustrated by tension, by arguments? Our 7 step roadmap gives you the tools to move from conflict to collaboration, to communication quickly and confidently. Have you ever been craving a stronger trust, a stronger connection with someone, personally or professionally? Discover communication tactics that build respect, can repair relationships, and unify teams, as well as families alike. We transform conflict into connection together, achieving unity. Unity inspires us in our home. Unity shapes society. It transforms workplaces. It helps us all work together better, from couples to families to huge corporations. What we do is help you turn that frustration into understanding. Have you ever heard somebody say, "What the frustration?" Yeah, I know. Sometimes they use a different word than frustration, but we need to find value in our actions instead of reacting in that anger, that frustration, that hate, that disconnection. We show that anger holds no value. It's just actions not gaining effective results. ANGER, actions not gaining effective results. There's no value to anger. Life happens in every relationship. Again, from personal to professional and from professional back to personal, from parenting time to partnerships, in the boardroom, in the bedroom, and every room in between. We show you how to embrace challenges and encourage a more inspired and inclusive future. That's the EII principle, and you'll see more of that when you go out to look at our podcast. I'm sorry, not our podcast, on our newsletters or the articles that I publish out there each week. Talks more about the encouragement, the inspiration and inclusive feature, EII. It goes to one goal, one vision, achieving unity in every area of life. Our call to action? Let's ditch that drama. Let's get stuff done. We show you how to turn your life from what may seem like a dumpster fire to a well-oiled machine, one that performs. Achieving unity is the path to stronger relationships, inspired leadership, and lasting change. Call me for any coaching, consulting, courses, and keynote speeches. And we're also doing workshops. You call and we can do workshops that are either short term, virtual, or long term. That's your office. Connect with us today. Again, www.realityfocusdynamics.com, 303-362-8733, which again is the same as 303 focused on your dial. You can also use the QR code down at the bottom right. Our guest coming up fast. Next week, we have Tiffany, Knock Your Socks Off Kellogg. She's working with moms without children, helping build on what we're doing and where we're going in families and what family life is like. Because all of August is talking about moms, mothers, parenting, and how life has changed going forward. On 8/6, I have a new guest. My firmware guest was to be here. She had to move to November, so she'll be here the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. But Linda Ray will come talk to us on 8/6. On August 13th, Jamie Martin, silence, doubt, and start living life on your terms. Do you feel sometimes you're not living life on your terms? Someone else is making all the decisions? Come talk to us next week, August 13th. Not next week, but on August 13th. Then Julie Hames, how to raise an adult. When you're raising your children, what are you thinking about just now? Or are we thinking about the future? Come back on August 20th. We'll talk more about that. Then, August 27th, Arthur Burick. Yes, you can raise happy, responsible children. Too many times we see them on the street. A lot of parents don't know how. Sometimes it's in our culture, sometimes how we learned. We just need to learn more, teach more, and learn how to raise happy children, make them responsible, make them understand they can be happy being responsible. So please come back on August 27th. Put this on your calendar. Would love to see you here every week. And today, a very close friend of mine, a person I think the world of in so many ways. He works in brain health, family success, and unlocking human potential. He's also known as the parent whisperer. Dr. Ali Lankarani, widely known as Dr. L, is a clinical neuroscientist. He's a speaker and children's performance expert. He's dedicated to helping families thrive. With over a decade of experience, he empowers parents to improve learning, improve behavior, and the emotional well being in our children through brain based strategies. And I know for myself, sometimes I don't use mine enough. That's why I turn to people like Dr. L. He blends science, compassion, practical tools to guide families toward healthier and again, happier lives. Don't we all want to be happier? He's a best selling author, host of the Role Model Maker TV, and a powerful advocate for unlocking the full potential in every child and parent. We'll hear this again later before we close, but his website's down there at the bottom right, rolemodelmaker.com. But now, if you would, please help me welcome Dr. Ali Lankarani, Dr. L.
Thank you, Mark. I'm very excited to be here.
Dr. L, it's so good to see you. I'm excited to be able to work with you in this. And let's see, recording is going, so we're back on track. Thank you. And Dr. L, thank you so much again. We may hear this twice, but it's just a pleasure knowing you and working with you. You've got so much knowledge, so much background, and so much understanding. Clinical neuroscientist, children's performance optimizer. When you talk to people, what do you tell people Do you have a more casual title? What do you tell people at a dinner party?
That's an awesome question. In fact, when I stepped away from private practice and started doing what I do currently, my wife had this huge concern about, I don't know what to tell people when they ask me, what does your husband do? So at this point, I think the shortest answer that I have is I'm a physician, a consultant, and an activist. And that is as condensed as I have been able to get it to be.
That is amazing. That's good because as I hear about activists and you're so much on the positive side, sometimes we hear the word activists and we see the people on TV that are not necessarily being professional, but you're active in so many positive ways, helping families, helping children. It's amazing how what sparked your interest? So you are a physician, you're a doctor, well known. What sparked your passion for helping kids and families and unlocking their full potential?
Well, I always joke. I mean, I do have attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. So when you were showing your categories and you had focus right in the middle of it, I'm like, I could definitely use some of that focus. But having said that, I always joke that it only took me a postdoctorate to figure out what's going on inside my head. And I always was passionate about helping people. When I was in high school, a lot of we used to take these new computer tests that would say what you should be when you grow up based on some questions that you would fill out. And a lot of it was about public service, social worker, things that was in service. And eventually, because of my natural tendency to do well in math and sciences, I pursued biology and evolutionary biology, environmental biology in undergrad, and ultimately human biology, which led me to my background in chiropractic medicine. But ultimately, I focused on pediatrics, chiropractic pediatrics, because I really felt that I make the biggest difference when I start with a young life that has many decades to still live its full potential. And because of my background coming from Iran and growing up in during the Iran-Iraq War, performance and achievement was a huge thing. My TEDx I talk about this. So it's kind of engineered into me at this point that, you know, optimizing your performance is just something that I'm all about. So when it came to optimizing human potential, I'm like the best place to start to get the most bang for the buck, of course, happens to be with the children. They have the least amount of conditioning, the most potential. And so that's where I focused. And long term, I realized that when it came to making a difference, it's much easier to work from top down and from inside out, working with the body instead of working against the body. So, clinical neuroscience and helping to rewire these developing minds became a passion of mine. And neurodevelopmental disorders, which ultimately ended up being what we now call the autism spectrum disorders, that spans everything from ADD and ADHD to Asperger's, Tourette's, dyslexia, as well as autism itself, is included under that umbrella and what we currently call neurodiversity.
Mm. I like that. I like that diversity. It's funny too, you talk about the AD and the ADHD and there's more of the attention deficit. Sometimes for myself, probably similar to you, I just say I have the A disorder because it fits a lot of those in the process. But that ability to focus, to get focus sometimes does help. And I appreciate what you're doing because of the help with children and parents and families, because some of the things that I work with in achieving unity is based on our culture and our learnings. And it's called many things. Sometimes they call it just a habit that we've created. Sometimes it's the perception, our perceptions create our reality. Do you talk about any of those things in the way you work?
Actually, that is one of the very first things that I was awoken to when I started the neurology. Because for most people, when we talk about the brain, we think of it as any other organ or any other system basically in our body. But we have to consider the fact that when it comes to our brain, which controls the function of everything else in our body, makes decisions, interprets the world, um, it is really encapsulated in our skull. It's disconnected in a huge way. It's not like our skin where it's in touch with the universe. It is disconnected from the rest of the universe. Yet it has to make sense of everything by being at the same time being disconnected and then make decisions that the rest of the body now has to perform in real time in the real world and get real results with it. So that's a huge responsibility. And it comes down to the fact that the brain is a reality emulator. That's what they call it.
Oh,
Because it
reality emulator.
because it takes all these signals, chemical, physical, all these different signals become electrical, and then ultimately it transforms them into this infrastructure, this hologram that now is its interpretation of the universe. None of us are really mentally connected to the world. That is a creation from our minds. And so when we talk about reality and how people are connected to reality or to even one another, we have to remember there's a lot that goes into that before you're even able to connect with the world, before you're even able to connect to another human being. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, there's lots of steps beforehand that like all of those switches have to turn on before you can even understand what that concept really means. And if you are one of those lucky people that understands what diversity and inclusion means, then it also has this responsibility of making sure that we promote it, that we actually help others to achieve it, because really that's what humanness is all about.
It is, and I like the way you say that. That's what humanness is all about. Because I've got an article, if you go out to my newsletters, it says putting the E into human makes it humane. And
Right.
that's where we need to be, is to be humane about how we look at each other and how we treat each other. Because that diversity, even though we're different in many ways, each and every one of us, we are also all the same. Because there are exceptions, of course, to every rule, but we're all born with a brain, we're all born with a heart, and we're all born with that blood that runs inside us all. And that blood, as the stories I tell and speak on, there's only four blood types, right? Type A, type B, type AB, and type O. And no matter where we go around the world, from Africa to Alaska to Scandinavia to any of the countries, China, Russia, wherever it is, Iran, Iraq, if we were to go to surgery, they're not going to run back home and say, "Hey, who's a buddy of Dr. L's or who's a buddy of Mark's?" and say, "We need some blood." That we need somebody that's tall, we need somebody that's short, we need somebody that smiles a lot, we need somebody that frowns more. No, they're going to need somebody that helps right there. Somebody donates that blood that runs through our hearts, each one of us, that feeds that brain, like you're talking about. That diversity that we have is also the feeding ground that we are all truly the same, right?
Absolutely. And earlier on, we were talking about the autism spectrum disorders, and I do want to bring this up as part of diversity and inclusion that we are dropping that term disorder because we're also realizing, and this is something that I
Oh,
experienced on a personal level, that different people have different ways of processing. And these individuals that are on the spectrum, they process the world, that connection, those signals that come in, they get processed differently. So naturally, the responses are different. But if we have that understanding of what's happening with this person and their processing, then we can definitely be more inclusive and cherish that diversity. Because as we know, many of the movers and shakers in the world and in our history have been part of this diverse group.
that is so true. And we can take that word disorder because what is a disorder? It's a challenge because of our differences. And those differences what makes the world what it is today in what we do. And I think that that background that you have in neuroscience is such a wonderful seed, the way that you're helping us and helping us grow in what we do. And as I look at that, and we talk about your neuroscience, I believe you also, with your background, so some of the old traditional Chinese medicines, I believe that you've also, and I don't want to use that word mastered, but you have truly taken on and learned and put to good use. Am I hearing that right?
That's correct. I've always been interested in a lot of the stuff Chinese, whether it's Chinese martial arts, Chinese culture, acupuncture. So naturally, when it came to medicine, of course, going through field of chiropractic, it's a holistic way of practicing medicine, holistic way of seeing human beings. It only made sense to discover this other aspect of how uh, people, long before there was modern science, looked at the human being, at the energy channels and the energy centers, and how they viewed ailment and how to optimize human potential. And basically, that was interesting to me as well, how to marry the Western approach and the Eastern approach together. And it helped me gain insight and a deeper perspective on how human beings exist, not just as atoms and molecules, but also as things that are more than just some of its parts.
That is so true. And I like hearing what you're having to say because so that some of its parts, that our human potential is based on all those parts, right? So when you're talking about unlocking the human potential, I guess in a way we're letting those parts loose so they can be more active.
Right.
Am I
One of
understanding
the
that correctly?
big thing, yeah, one of the big things, especially with my expertise and my background, was that, when we talk about everybody, all the listeners that we have here, they are gonna wake up and they have a whole set of agendas, things that they need to do, responsibilities, dreams, goals, plans, is stretched out way out into the future, right? And we want to get more of those things done. But if we want to ask something from our body, if we want our body to support us in getting these things done, the very first thing we need to do is to make sure we are supporting our body so that it in turn can go ahead and support us. And sometimes we forget that step. So we're asking our body and trying to trick our body to do a little bit more while we give it less. And this is not a sustainable thing.
Mm.
Humanity is discovering that on a planetary base right now, that there are no shortcuts to sustainability. And you really have to prioritize and understand what are the key things that you need to have as a foundation before you can build on it. Whether it is our civilization wanting to build and become intergalactic, or whether it is you as an individual wanting to achieve more in life or be a better parent to your child, or whether you want the most for your kids and for your kids to get good grades, right? All of those require that foundation to be there. And if you're talking about your brain being the foundation, the control center for everything else in your body, then having an optimal foundation of supporting your brain is essential for everything that comes after, basically. So that's where we come.
Yeah, I like what you're saying because we need to take care of ourselves. And one of the issues that I see, and I'd like to have your feedback on this, there's so much that we hear about from the news, from the television to newspapers that we may read still to the internet and Facebook and all these things. There's so much information out there, and being able to decipher, to be able to pull out the things that are true, the things that some study may or may not have proven something, but the basis behind those studies may not have been quite as, let's just say, positive in effect, taking this forward. How do we handle that? How do we look at all this information and how do we help grow our mind and take care of our mind so that we can improve on a positive basis?
So I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit, and we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this in just a minute. Um, with the information age that we are currently in, one of the things that we thought was going to happen was we're going to have all of this information at everybody's disposal and people can make the best choices because they have all the information. But what we found out, as you mentioned, is that information without a filter of prioritization and value systems is just noise. And the very first victim of this noise is truth. So the very first
Wow.
victim when we dump information on somebody is they actually lose perspective on the truth. And the truth sinks to the bottom because there is so much more interesting and engaging information out there. And truth is often mundane and trivial, and it's in the details, and nobody wants to really mess with it.
Uh,
That's why, when you look at researchers and their research articles, it's not interesting to read that. Basically, it lacks that human component of excitement, right? The emotions.
yes.
So the end result is that in this day and age, we now are creating this thing called AI that is supposed to help us in deciphering this information, getting just the stuff that we need out. But then again, we have to remember that the bias that was in the person that designed the AI will be carried into the information that will be shared with you. So we can't entirely rely on AI to give us all the information, as they say, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It might be part of the truth, or it might not be the whole truth, or basically. So, as a result of it, we still need to be able to use our own value system, our own judgments to decipher what are our priorities. So, when it comes to how we've done this traditionally, it has been through professionals, right? You would go to the doctor, you would go to the attorney, they have access to the information, but they would listen to what you have and they would whittle down that information to the stuff that's relevant to you. And then they would put that in front of you in a way that you can digest and then respond to. So when it comes to the issue of how to set that foundation, and we talked about the brain, uh, I would take all of that information that's out there and bring it down to four components that really help set the foundation for a healthy brain that can go ahead and maximize its potential, control the function of your body, and thereby make the most of what comes in from the universe and how it interacts with the world. So those four things, if you guys are ready, grab your pen and paper, and in this particular order: sleep, oxygenation, nutrition, and whole body movement.
Okay.
Sleep, oxygenation, nutrition, and whole body movement. So many times when you talk to people about what's your health plan, what do you do? Most people think about what? Health plan, yeah, I have Blue Cross Blue Shield or some insurance company, right? And
United Health, who
and
knows?
right? And so immediately you're putting your health outside of your body and in control of somebody else. And then what they tend to do is try to work against the current, work against your body to try to get your body to do things that is desirable to what your goals are. But working with the body, this is the 21st century medicine, working with your brain, you can actually unlock your potential, you can alleviate ailments, you can do a lot of things so that even if you do need the traditional healthcare system, it is minimized as far as the amount of dependency that you would have to have on it. And you will be that much more in charge of the direction that you take your health and long term. If that healthcare model is not available to you, as in many parts of the world it's not, you still need to come back to the basics. And those basics are those four things that I just mentioned.
And that is excellent too, because I liked what you said about being more in charge of our bodies and what we're doing and how we're taking care of ourselves and not so dependent on our medical, and I apologize, but industry, because in many ways it is an industry. And would I be fair to say there's more today, as you mentioned, later as we go in the 21st century. There's more doctors that are thinking this way, but aren't there also a lot of doctors that still like the old medicine way because that actually helps their priorities, it helps their culture, what they're pushing, but it also helps their bottom line, helps their income.
Yeah, I would like to separate the industry from the professional, in the
Okay.
sense that the professional goes to school to treat patients. The industry has its own focus, which oftentimes is mixed
Oh,
with
okay.
politics and business and profiting and networking and all these other things. So, industry is not patient centered, but the professional is. The clash comes where the industry tries to dictate to the professional how to practice, which is actually part of the reason why I left the industry, because was not addressing the whole human being. And I felt that a lot of things that I was discussing did not begin and end with the neurodiverse kids and their families, but actually could be applied to all families globally. And so that's the activist in me, decided
Yeah.
to step away from the physician role some to create room for me to actually help with consulting and help with the activism. And it is my hope that our children, our next generation, understands that role because I believe, like as you described it, activism, constructive activism, as in trying to
Positive.
make your world a better place, is a dying art that doesn't exist, whether it's because the technology has come in and people are more disconnected than ever before, or whether it is because people are more emotionally less intelligent when it comes to expressing what they're feeling and what they want. All of those things could be related to how we tend to be disconnected, not only from the world, but really from the stuff that we want and we should have in our lives. And hopefully, our children will find that way through this activism that I'm talking about to be able to chart a course for themselves to make that happen in their society, for their communities, and for their families.
That is so true. And if you don't mind just to step back just a little bit, as you mentioned AI, the artificial intelligence, I sometimes joke about it also being antiquated intelligence, depending on where the data comes from, where the information comes from. And I've been in computers for many, many years and working with the data. And as I think you may have mentioned to you before, I use 5 different AIs on my system at any one time. I can go out there and test AI against AI. What one computer program uses in AI, and then what another one does, and ask that same question across all 5 of them, and of course, receive different results in that. It's definitely a situation, and being back in the IT days of the if then else. So if it's this situation, if this answer is true, then it goes here, or it goes into else. If that's not true, it goes into something else. But we're able to determine that, and hopefully, if we're using factual data, reality, we can come up with an educated answer. But as we're talking about too many times today, we have cultures that, and it's a situation where it's not their fault that they did not, I don't mean they, it's a we for me too. There's a lot of things that I don't know, but there's a lot of things that I don't know, but it's up to me. It's not my fault I didn't learn it back then, but it is my responsibility to learn it today so I'm not passing on some of that antiquated intelligence going forward.
In fact, I would say that I oftentimes sit at the United Nations meetings. One of the areas that is of big concern for governments around the world is the gap between human evolution and progress and technology evolution and progress, uh, being a wild west. But the reality of, since we're talking about diversity and inclusion, is that the majority of the people doing the programming for the next generation of technology are not the general populace. It's not evenly distributed. Like we don't have programmers from all different countries. We do not have programmers that are equally represented in gender or in ethnicity and religious backgrounds. So the data that is being put in there, even if it is for a certain gender or for a religious group, is being put in by a person who actually is not the person that is the expert in that field or is connected to that field. So now you're finding that there is gender bias in this, there is religious and ethnic bias in there. And this becomes an issue when we're talking about diversity and inclusion because we need to be included in the dialogue for deciding what to put into technology. And if that is not being put in there, not only is it that, you get the bias from the person who's putting in, but also when the problems arise, the people that are experiencing the problem oftentimes don't have a voice to remedy it or offer suggestions through technology. So that also is equally important. We're kind of getting a little off topic, but it is still related to diversity and inclusion.
It is. And we talk about the diversity and inclusion. We also think about the equity, the DEI. I know there's a lot
Yes.
of political fight around that right now, which is where I grow to encouraging, inspiring, and including others, which comes out with that diversity, equity, which is so important. And that equity has to be there. That what I go into on the inspiration side of inspiring others to build on what they have to get to inclusion or including others. There's so much that we come into meetings or even in personal encounters where someone's always finding something wrong. And such as in the beginning when I was talking about that, we've got to understand that if we're looking for something wrong, it's not going to be positive. And that's what I mean when I say positive. We're going to have a positive aspect of what we know, what we learn, and where we're going. And back to it, that comes in to the equity side and doesn't get us into an antiquated, an old time data doesn't matter anymore, information doesn't matter anymore, but getting into what we know today, which I see what you're doing when we're unlocking that human potential you talk about with that right information. We can say if this is true, then this, or else if it's not true, we can go another direction, right?
I mean, when we were growing up, we knew that having access to education would make a huge difference in your future projection of what you were able to do, right? Fast forward that by another 20 years, and we know that when somebody has access to internet and technology and a computer, there's an entire world that opens up to them that if they didn't have this wouldn't even be part of the equation.
Yeah.
So that that equity needs to include all of these things. And in order to do that, the people that already have those have a sense of responsibility to making sure that they support those that do not, those that are at risk or are marginalized.
Mhm. There is, and there's so much technology and let's just say our medical terms. It's difficult for people who don't know to understand it going forward. And such as your as a doctor in neuroscience. I mean, that's amazing to me in itself. The neuro, the brain, and the science of that. It sounds intimidating in a lot of ways. As we talk
Well,
about
if,
this,
if, if you want me to if you want me to simplify it, I can say
please.
that the brain, as I mentioned, first of all, the mind is a reality emulator. So we already discussed that. But when it comes to the brain, it basically does one thing as much as possible in as many different ways as possible, which is connecting. The human brain is not fully developed when we are born. We are one of the few species that we are unviable for 2 years after birth, basically, because we can't clear the birth canal with a huge brain. So
Yeah.
some of that brain development has to happen once we get out. Now, that process happens to involve making connections of different neurons within the brain, connections of the different brain centers that are responsible for different tasks, connections of the brain and the body, the mind and body. And ultimately, once you've got all of that figured out, now your connection to the outside world, as in the other human beings, other things that are in your environment, and all of this is sensory driven as far as what comes in. So you can imagine how a person who is born into a place that has sensory hazards or sensory deprivations is going to develop differently than somebody who is in a nurturing and supportive environment that is
Mhm.
enriched with all kinds of multimodal sensory things that develop that brain in its fullest capacity, right? So the expectation from the two individuals ends up being completely different. The support that they need ends up being different. And we need to be able to understand that and to be able to project that in our interactions with one another. That's where empathy comes from.
I like what you're saying, and I can see us discussing some of these things very clearly, but yet a lot of this is maybe fairly in depth for a lot of us in that same process. So when we look at this and us as parents, as we see things with our parents and our child's development, what are some things that a lot of us think that is helping that may not be helping?
Um,
A loaded
so,
question,
so
probably, but
Yeah, so this question is beautiful in many different ways because part of this, if you look at my title, a lot of times I'm called the parent whisperer because sometimes parents inadvertently get in the way of their children's progress. That's what I found out in private practice. And this is not to shame them or load them with more work or anything like that. The purpose of it is to have a better understanding because that better understanding creates that empathy and more constructive dialogue, like we were talking about at the beginning. So the priorities of a parent need to be like a parent needs to be aware of their own priority. They need to be aware that the child's priorities, being born in a different time and a different era, will be different, has to be different than your priorities. That creates conflict. That creates tension. So although in the early years, and we're talking about 0 to 6, really, a lot of times what you say is what goes. But ultimately, from 6 to 12 years of age, you really are letting the kids start deciding for themselves and seeing the results, and then having to figure out how to deal with the results. And for many parents, this doesn't happen until teenage years when first the children start being teenagers and don't want to listen to you because they want to build their own identity. And secondly, once they go into college. So a lot of the problems that modern or industrialized countries are noticing now is because of this systematization and standardization of life and education system. Many of our young adults are not really adults. They are just overgrown kids, basically. They have difficulties managing a life. Like you look at Alexander, uh, 2000 years ago at 17, going and taking over the world. It's like, how
yeah.
is that even possible? Where I have to remind my own child to go ahead and put food in their mouth, you know, those kind of.
Well, that's
So,
true. Go ahead.
so I was just saying that when you ask me what is the thing that people think is good, but it's not really for raising kids, I would say the first thing is the overmanagement, the helicopter parenting. So that would be the first thing, and the second thing is virtual learning is not the same as real world learning. Nowadays we have Google at our hands and YouTube, and kids are exposed to a lot more than they ever were before. And they might sound like adults when they talk about different topics that usually I wouldn't know until I was like 30 years old, but they know all about it. But knowing the information and knowing how to use the information is completely different. And that comes from real world learning. And you cannot teach that in virtual learning. So when we went through COVID and we had these online classes, and now I see a lot of kids are going through and having everything done digitally, it's not the same as, picking up dirt and cutting your finger by mistake and, all of those things that teach us that what sharp and what hot really means. You can talk about hot all you want and describe it in the book, but unless you have burnt your finger, you don't know what hot really means. And the effect that it has on your nervous system and the preventative structures and the neural rewiring that happens, that doesn't happen with virtual learning. So you lose the mind body connection. And that's where a lot of problems later on happen as we find out like things like depression and autism are on the rise. Anxiety is on the rise. Why? Because the brain doesn't feel like it can actually go ahead and make a difference in its destiny because it's not connected. It knows a lot, but doesn't know what to do with what it knows. So this is the biggest thing that I warn parents and families about, that get out there with your kids, go for a walk in the park, have a real conversation, and emoji is not the same thing.
It's a very good point, and I like what you're saying. And there's my kids are grown now, and there's so many things I think about that. Gosh, I wish I would have taught them this. Gosh, I wish I would have taught them that. But I didn't know that back then. And there's a lot of things that I know, a lot of things that you know, and other things that other people know that we don't know. And so it's a very diverse amount of knowledge out there. But as we talk about this, how do you, in your position, help parents become better role models without asking them to feel like they need a PhD in parenting? How do you?
It actually that's a good question, and I go back to the basics like we were talking about. Um, when it comes to humans, we earlier talked about the evolution of technology versus the evolution of humans. The evolution of humans is much more linear and gradual. The evolution of technology is exponential. And humans cannot keep up with that technology evolution. If you try to do that, you're going to lose. It's guaranteed. Um, and that's why we created technology so we could kind of surpass some of our limitations. But we need to understand our limitations, respect those limitations, and realize that when it comes to human beings, there are only three things that really matter. If you can teach this to your kids, if you can role model this for your kids, then that is the most important thing you could have taught them. And it's not the latest technology or the most expensive course or the gadgets that are coming out or whatever. Those three things are health, relationships, and how to pursue happiness. So you need to be able to, as a parent, role model that it's okay for things to be put on pause so that you can tend to yourself to be healthy, so that you can go ahead and have a relationship with your spouse or make friends or whatever it happens to be and be social. Or that you actually have a dream and you take the time to pursue that dream, whether it's going back to school or whether it's launching a new career, whatever it happens to be, or picking up a new hobby, show your kids that you don't come last. Because when you don't do that, they're learning that they come last when they grow up, when they have kids and obligations. So, health, relationships, and pursuit of happiness is the best thing you can role model and teach your kids.
I think that is so true. I like what you're saying, Dr. L, because when I hear that pursue happiness, one of the things that I work with a lot is to make sure that they understand that pursue their happiness and not the happiness that has been generated or felt by someone else that they should, quote unquote, do. Because that understanding of what truly makes them happy makes a big difference, doesn't it?
And and I just, as you were mentioning this, I realized some people might actually ask us, well, what about money? What about wealth and these kind of things? And I'm going to say that given our current climate, there are plenty of very unhappy billionaires and gajillionaires that are trying to change the world. So obviously, that is not where it starts. You have to have a full cup before you can pour from it into all these other areas. And that comes from your health, your happiness, and your relationship. And a lot of times people are like, well, I'll have this instead of that. No, no, no. As a whole human being, you need to have all three of these. Please don't settle for one out of three or two out of three and say that, hey, I did pretty good because I had two out of three. Figure out a way to have health, relationships, and the pursuit of happiness every single day in your life. And you will be better off, and the world will be better off because of it.
That is such good words. That I'm so glad that you, since we're getting close, about 7 minutes before we close, that is so true. The health and that relationship that to me is so important. A true, honest relationship is so important. And to be able to pursue happiness that we have learned within ourselves and not someone else's, well, they're doing that and they're happy. That's not necessarily us. And that may not be pursuing our happiness if we follow that path. We're asking other people.
Happiness is not a state. Happiness is a process. And you want your entire day to be that process.
Every day.
Right.
Every day. It's so true. Again, we're getting kind of close. If you had a magic wand, Dr. L, let's just say somehow maybe it's the rubbing the little genie bottle. But if you had a magic wand that could change just say one thing about how society supports children's development, children's development today, what would that be?
We oftentimes complain about lack of resources when it comes to healthcare or overspending in the defense department or a over budgeted government, all these things. But ultimately, everything comes back to we have a foundational unit for society, the family. And if we put that at the center of everything, prioritize everything based on family comes first. Family is where the support, inspiration, empowerment of children comes. Family is where volunteer work from the parents happens. And all the people, like, you can't get a more efficient way of making society and the next generation better. Support families, prioritize families, and wherever you get the chance and the opportunity, it's not just your family, but those families around you as well. There are families in need. Find ways to support them. Make your local community be more supportive of families. And so my magic wand would be to prioritize everything so families on top.
Families on top. I like what you're saying that there's so much about that, and it comes down to education too, right? That we have the right education and the knowledge that we know that back to pursuit of happiness, that can be our happiness, is to be able to raise our children in a good way, helping them have that freedom, but also being able to say, wait a minute, here's another idea. Let's think about this, and helping them grow in the right ways. Open up that ability to be able to say no, which a lot of people, a lot of parents, it seems, do not know how to do. Not that I'm a pro at it either, or that I was a pro at it, but it's a situation of us in that pursuit of happiness that we can bring our children along to be able to pursue that with the right knowledge going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about one human family. Ultimately, if we are all one human family, we need to know at a most fundamental way how to support family. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, what's next for you, Doctor? We got just a couple minutes left. What's your any exciting project, books? What's your next breakthrough
Um,
on the horizon?
with my ADHD, I have a lot of projects. I am more focused on our nonprofit organization, Foundation for Optimal Beginnings, and finding ways to integrate that into another mega project called International Organization for African Development, where while their goal is to bring healthcare to the continent of Africa, our goal from the nonprofit organization is to bring education, vocational training, and careers to the continent in support of that health goal that they have. So that's my big project.
Good luck, and I'm so glad I get to participate with you in that. And if I can partially close on one fun side of it, remember we're not going to be. It's not ADD anymore. It's ADC. attention deficit challenge, and attention deficit hyperactivity challenge. They're not disorders. A lot of us have it. Not trying to justify it, but it is a challenge that we must take forward and find that answer. And Dr. L, it has truly been an honor to have you with us today, and how you have shared insights that are designed to inspire parents. And when we say parents, as I work in the family industry as well, and I don't mean industry in negative, but in with parents, I mean grandparents, because grandparents are so important to help give this and be the caregivers that we can all grow and build and have healthier, as you're saying, happier and more productive lives for ourselves as grandparents, great grandparents, for parents, for our children. And what you have brought to us today in your knowledge, your neuroscience, your additional training in traditional Chinese medicine, talked a little bit, think about your chiropractic pediatrics. And again, you have an over a decade of award-winning private practice serving the neurodiverse children. I mean, you seem to blend science with compassion and the practical strategies to make what I have seen to be some real differences in many people's lives. So thank you again, Dr. L, for sharing your valuable wisdom and making today's episode an extraordinary experience.
My pleasure. I was glad to have this time with you.
It's truly an honor. Your dedication to empowering others to achieve the impossible truly shines through. And we know our audience will feel, the ones that are here today, the ones that will see this later, because it will be on YouTube, to feel that lasting impact of our message. Because our journey is a powerful reminder that unity begins within through self-awareness, the resilience, and the willingness to grow from failure. This message, I think, perfectly mirrors the Achieving Unity that when you're bringing to us today, perfectly mirrors the Achieving Unity success formula, because we're turning that chaos, that isolation into inclusion, and that broken trust into purposeful collaboration, something that we all need to work for. We must remember that unity itself isn't just an ideal, it's not a soft skill. It too is a daily chance to lead with empathy, act with integrity, and uplift others along the way. If anyone felt a spark or anything from what I've said today, what Dr. L has told us today, please contact him. TheRoleModelMaker.com. Get in touch with him. Let him know. Let me know. Let's work together. This has been awesome. And Dr. L, appreciate you so much for being here. So until next time, let us continue
Next,
turning chaos. It's a pleasure, Dr. L. Let us keep achieving unity. You can reach me again, www.achievingunity.com. Call me at 303-362-8733, which is 303 focused. If you want to get to Dr. L through me, feel free to, because Dr. L and I meet together a couple of times per week. Anything that you have, we can stay focused on turning chaos into connection as we are achieving unity by harnessing the power of encouraging, inspiring, and including others in building better businesses, better lives, and a better world. Life is what we make it. So let's make it awesome together in unity. Any last words, Dr. L?
optimize your brain potential and you can optimize humanity's potential.
I like the way you say that, Dr. L. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Again, thank you, Dr. L, for your service, your time, and your commitment. Hope to see you all again next week. Till then, cheers.